Aloha and good evening, everyone. You're watching The Fontaine Factor, and I'm Representative George Fontaine. Tonight, cybercrime in Hawaii. Is it a problem? Is it a real big problem? We're going to get into that and talk about how big a problem it really is and where we are going in terms of trying to protect the citizens of the state of Hawaii, how we prosecute cyber criminals, and things that you as a consumer can do to protect yourself against cyber attacks. We have two very distinguished guests this evening who are joining me to talk about this problem. They are experts in their fields. My first guest is Deputy Prosecuting Attorney, Senior Prosecuting Attorney, Chris Van Marter from the City and County of Honolulu. And sitting to his right and to my left in the middle is Mr. Jason Martin. Jason is the president of Secure DNA Consulting. And he also brings a wealth of experience regarding ways to secure computer networks against cyber attacks. So gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, recently we just had an informational briefing here at the Capitol regarding cybercrime. And in that 2.5 hours, it seemed we barely scratched the surface. But one thing that I think everyone walked away from that meeting, that informational meeting, was that it's a big problem. And it's pervasive in all parts of society. It can go from elderly people down to kids and businesses that you would think were secure. We recently heard about the Sony network attack for the PlayStation 3. Locally here, we had an issue with somebody breaking in and taking records from University of Hawaii. So this is a prevalent problem. So before we go on and I start asking you folks some questions about it and we can get into the details, I thought I'd put up a slide here for the viewers to see exactly what is a cybercrime. Well, it covers a wide range of illegal activities. It's scams, it's financial fraud, identity theft, stalking and bullying, sexual enticement of children, impersonation, character assassination, and even terrorism. So we see that it covers a pretty wide brush. Now, Jason, your company is primarily involved with, I guess, protecting consumers and businesses against these crimes. Can you tell us a little bit about what the breadth of this problem is and how much crime is going on out there?
Well, it's increasing at an exponential rate year after year. I think this year we had a 93% in web-based attacks as we have more and more people moving to the internet. We had a 42% increase in mobile attacks as more and more people use iPads and phones. And the companies that we help protect, some of the stats that I gave in the informational briefing, we had over 4 million attacks against companies based in Hawaii over the 6-month period of, I think, June to December of 2010.
So when you say attacks, what exactly does that mean?
A focused attempt by some external party to penetrate the internal network of one of our customers. So they vary from web-based attacks, trying to penetrate into their websites, direct attacks against their platforms, and very often attacks against the users or employees within their corporation. People tend to be one of the more targeted aspects of a company or organization. Yeah.
Chris, on the prosecutor side, have you seen an uptick in the kinds of cases that are being reported? If so, what types, and what has your office been dealing with in the last year?
We've definitely seen an increase in the reports of internet fraud. The Internet Crime Complaint Center reported in 2009 that the number of internet crime complaints received by their organization rose 22% over the numbers from 2008. Just as important, the dollar losses suffered from 2009 doubled in 1 year. And the Internet Crime Complaint Center reports that only 1 in 7 internet-related crimes are even reported to law enforcement. So we know that the numbers are much higher than what the Internet Crime Complaint Center reports to us. Locally, in addition to those 200 plus cases a month that we see involving Hawaii victims, there are another 50 plus cases that are reported just to the Honolulu Police Department. And again, that doesn't represent the true scope of the problem because many victims have been trained not to report incidents of cybercrime to law enforcement. Instead, they report it to either their bank or to their credit bureau, and if they receive restitution or reimbursement, they let it end there. And so the problem is bigger than even the numbers indicate.
Incredible. So I know that just yesterday, and I was sharing the story with you off the air before we started, I received an email from a close friend It basically looked as though it came from that person, and the subject line was blank, but inside of the message there was a hyperlink to a web address that was some domain /invitefriends.html. So if I hadn't been at this briefing or had foresight to know that this was probably a scam, I probably would have clicked on it thinking that, oh, my friend must be inviting me to some website or something for me to check out. And lo and behold, I look at the CC list and I also see that my wife is also on that list. And so my wife and I sit across from each other when we were working on a table, and I immediately jumped up and looked over the screen. I said, "Don't open that email from that person because it's probably a scam." I also got yesterday, poor Mrs. Henderson passed away in Guyana and has $150,000 for me. If I just simply fill out this information, my banking information, and send it to them, they will deposit $150,000. Now, we've been getting those kinds of things for years, but they seem to continue to go on. You would think people would wise up, right? I mean, they would understand that these kinds of things are scams, but I guess people are gullible enough to fall into it. Maybe you can get into that a little bit, Jason.
Yeah, I think we do have a saying that it's you can patch everything in your organization except for your people. And so I think attackers know that, and they tend to go for the weakest link, and that often is the person. People want to believe that they have good luck and someone's leaving them $15 million, but that's not the case. Or the fact that they exploit their friends, like in your case, to come after you. It's from a more trusted source. Definitely see that on the rise across consumer and business space.
Now, I understand one of the things was talked about in our briefing was the scams that came up after the Japan earthquake and tsunami. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we actually have, so pretty much any major event, we're seeing scams right now dealing with the Norway tragedy. Those are hitting the internet already. After the tsunami, we're seeing scams associated with that. Any major news event that comes out, the scammers will use that. They'll either do it in an email campaign, they'll poison search engine results, so that if you visit Google, some of the results that you see in there might actually lead you to a malware site because they want to end up as high into the search results as a legitimate news story to get a chance for you to click through. When you click on those links, they could do a variety of things. Often, the website is set up to try and compromise your machine so that the attacker now has control of your machine. It may simply just ask you to disclose personal information, bank account information, username and password, or to get you to click and run a program that would be malicious in nature.
So what are some of the challenges, Chris, when you guys are going after prosecuting these things? I mean, a lot of times, even consumers here may actually subscribe to an internet service provider, on the mainland somewhere, and that must present a challenge for you folks when you want to go after and prosecute these folks. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? I mean, what are the challenges you face being a prosecutor?
Well, there's basically two methods that we follow in internet crime investigations. One, we follow the electronic trail of evidence, and the other, we follow the money, if there's money involved. In terms of the electronic trail of evidence, it's important that victims not delete either emails or any correspondence or any receipts, invoices, bills, etc., that they may have obtained as a result of dealing with someone over the internet, because it's very important for us to have that initial email, to get the email header and trace the IP address back to the device that sent the email. So number one, we need victims to not delete the things that they've received, to retain them in electronic form so that they can be recovered by law enforcement. And then from there, in general, we'll trace the IP address to an internet service provider, and then from there, hopefully to a physical address. But unfortunately, many times, the electronic trail ends at open wireless hotspot. The bad guys, the smart bad guys, know that if they use a wireless hotspot at a local coffee restaurant, that it's going to be much more difficult for us to identify them as their perpetrators. So the biggest problem we have is just to attribute a malicious email or some sort of online scam to a particular person, putting them behind the keyboard at the time of the online communication. In terms of the money, if they have wired money, we need for them to retain again any email communications with Western Union or their bank or credit union, maintain those in electronic format for us, and then get them to us as quick as possible. If they've had telephone communications with suspects, we need them to preserve that as well. One of the biggest problems that we have is that there is no law either on the state or federal level for the retention of records. There's no requirement that email providers retain deleted email or text messages, a voicemail. And so if the customer has deleted those, it's going to be very difficult for us to recover those. We're hoping that Congress will pass a law pending before Congress that would require service providers, both internet service providers and cell phone providers, to retain those records for up to 2 years. And if we can just get a hearing on that bill, it appears to have bipartisan support. That would dramatically help law enforcement because we would have records out there for 2 years relating to scams.
And I think we were going to see some of that come up this time in the next session. We're going to look at some cybercrime laws as well. And again, it'll be a bipartisan effort to try to get these things through. This whole issue is not a partisan issue. It's an issue that sweeps all across society, and it really shouldn't have any political bounds to it. It should be based on what's right to protecting the people of the state of Hawaii. So, Jason, what are some of the other kinds of scams that we've seen? I know there's also the one where they had people write to you, and it looks like it's coming from your friend who's traveling in a foreign country. Maybe you can talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, they'll tend to say that something's happened to them, they've been mugged, their passport stolen, they have no money, and it's a cry to help to their friends and family, which in reality is just the people in their contact list, to send them money, wire money, typically via Western Union or one of those quick cash type situations. And unfortunately, people fall for it because it's not. They don't usually ask for a lot of money. They usually ask for, $1,500, $2,000. People want to help out their friends, and they do it. Once the money's been sent, it's pretty much gone. And like Chris was saying, very hard to trace.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, one of the things, I mean, you've already mentioned it, how we need to train consumers to look for the red flags, to not automatically click on links or open up emails. And so one of the things that we recommend is that a computer user learn how to identify the email header that comes with an email. You know, most web-based email providers or even Outlook and some of the other email programs will allow you to easily pull up the email header. And once you have that email header, you can quickly trace where that email came from. It's true that the IP addresses can be faked or spoofed by the bad guys, but that's normally what I do. If I get an unsolicited email, I'll look at the email header and I'll go right above the to from line and I'll look for that first IP address, and I'll use a search engine on the internet called ARIN, American Registry for Internet Numbers, and I'll identify the service provider that holds the license to that IP address, and it'll tell me generally where that service provider is located. And so that's a real quick way for a consumer to identify where, in most cases, where the email came from. And you know, a lot of the unsolicited email is coming from Canada, Europe, Asia. And so if you look at the IP address for an email that you get and you see it's coming from one of those places, I mean, that's a good indication that it's probably a fraudulent email, and to not click on it, open it, or anything like that.
Folks, if you're just joining us, this is the Fontaine Factor. I'm Representative George Fontaine, and joining me this evening, we're talking about cybercrimes. And these two gentlemen that are here, Mr. Chris Van Marter, who is a deputy prosecutor, City and County Honolulu, and Mr. Jason Martin, who's president of Secure DNA Consulting. We're talking about the problem, how big it is, which we've just discussed, and now we're going into some of the areas of where consumers can do to protect themselves. Now, Chris, as you were mentioning about checking the header on the emails, you know, I have a Mac, but in order for that to be displayed, I think you actually have to turn a setting on, isn't that correct, with your email program that will show a lot of that information. And I can imagine with some, because I think with the graphical user interface that we have now with the Macs and the PCs with Windows and all that, is the whole idea of getting away from, you know, codes and command lines and make everything look pretty. But in actuality, we're masking certain critical information like what you mentioned. I'm not even sure myself how I turned the IP so I could see that header information. I mean, there must be a setting. Well, where would you look for that?
Well, I mean, I'll let Jason answer that, but I mean, here's the analogy. If you receive an unsolicited piece of mail in your mailbox, one of the things you'll probably look at is where it came from. You'll look at the stamps, the post offices that stamped it, so you have some idea where it came from. An email header just gives you some indication the route that email took from sender to recipient. As far as how to turn on the setting for the Mac, I'll let Jason answer that.
Well, even for the PC, I mean, it comes as a default. I think most consumers, could care less about it. But I think after watching the show, they'll maybe start caring more about that kinds of information, of where things are coming from.
Yeah, if somebody's using Outlook, it's simply right-clicking on the option button. You can put your mouse over the email, right-click, hit options. You're going to see the email header come up. I'll normally copy and paste that into a Word document, look for that IP address right above the to from subject lines. That's the IP address of the device used to send the email. Again, assuming that it wasn't faked by the bad guy. But you can easily trace the IP address back to an internet service provider with Outlook. Yahoo, Gmail, Hotmail, they all have options that you can choose when you're in their program that help you pull up the email header for a particular email.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that with the email, not just emails, a lot of the emails that you get, like you were saying, come with a link. And a lot of people use web browser-based email readers now, and that allows rich, formatting and pictures within the email. The problem with that is it also allows them to hide the URL. So the URL might look like www.aol.com, but if you actually click on that link, it takes you to badguy.com or malicioushost.com. So what I encourage people to do is when they receive an email with a link in it, you can right-click on the link, just copy link, go out to Notepad, paste it, and if you actually look at it, you'll see that it's going to some other site other than what it's being put forward as. Yeah, and that's a real easy way to look at things. Now,
these are all great tips. Is there a place online where people can go to find this information? Do you have any suggested resources? I'm a dad with my wife and 2 kids at home, and I'm sure I want them to be safe. Where could I go to get that information? Do you have any sites to recommend?
We put together a consumer protection presentation that they could go to our site, securedna.com, and we'll put it up there on one of the feeds, and that covers tips on what tools you should be running, what are some of the tricks you should be aware of, like URL spoofing. What we're seeing a lot now is attackers using URL shorteners, like bit.ly, or Google has a shortener. And so we have tips on that, tips on things you can do to keep yourself safe, the browsers, the plugins that you need to use. There's other things you can do too. I see a lot of people put their PCs out on the curb. Right? You would never do that with your safe with all your documents in it. So we have tips on using hard drive encryption, making sure you wipe your PC. A lot of broad different topics. I know we're specifically talking about email and web-based security right now, but there's a lot more that people need to be aware of.
Now, for companies, the other problem is a company can go and build the most secure firewall in the world and put all kinds of encryption, from fingerprint readers to everything else on the computer. But when it comes down to a company that has to protect itself, I think its biggest threat is its own employees. Am I wrong with that one? I mean, I've heard of stories where, and I think in the recent attacks, where there were some very secure sites, government sites, where people actually picked up a DVD in the parking lot and took it into the office and looked on it to see it. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it had something enticing on there, like a porn label or something like that, or something else that made it, like the person couldn't wait to get home to do it. They take it into the business, they put the DVD in, and then there you go. The Trojan horse is launched into the network, and it's game over. Same with thumb drives. Have you folks? How about you, Chris? Have you seen those kinds of things here in Hawaii where that's happened?
Well, we've actually prosecuted a couple of cases involving disgruntled employees who were terminated for various reasons, and they still had a way to get into the employer's computer network. And in both instances, one employer got in, and employee got in, and he generated a lot of fraudulent invoices in an attempt to basically harm the company's business reputation, and they actually lost customers. In another example, an employee got into a real estate agency's system after being fired and deleted basically the entire hard drive.
Wow.
And
No backup.
No backup. According to the real estate company, that data was valued at over $100,000. So disgruntled employees is one category of suspects that we're seeing who are causing harm to businesses. But there are others, the hackers that Jason can talk about.
Yeah, specifically to the USBs and CDs, when companies hire us to test their security, we test both from the internet, internally we plug into their network and test their security systems, but we're also doing both what we call spear phishing and media dropping, which is what you're referring to. Spear phishing is where we pretend to be a bad guy sending bad emails at their employees, very targeted, trying to get them to fill out an employee satisfaction survey or something like that. When they visit our site, we compromise their machine much like an attacker would do and gain a footprint into their network. We do physical assessments where we will burn a CD. What we'll usually do is we'll mark some new movie that's out, and we'll say Thor download, right, or something like that will entice people to put in. What we found is previously we'd put a label on it and we'd say confidential payroll information and a real nice company label. But what we found is employees will generally turn those in. They don't want to be caught with that. But as we've put on like a movie or something enticing, they will plug that into their computers and use it. The USBs that we will put on there, we'll put on family vacation pictures or photos or something that will maybe make them curious to look at it. And once they click on it or activate it, it connects to our systems and we have control of their system at that point.
Wow. So this must be like a booming business for you folks at this point, yeah, with all this that's been happening.
Yeah, it's definitely, to give you an idea, when we founded the company in 2006, we went 400% growth, 500%. We were the second fastest growing company in Hawaii for a number of years.
Wow.
We're up to 20 employees now locally, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. I mean, every time we turn around, there's a new attack. It's Darwinistic in fashion, because as the security companies and the technology companies adapt, so do the attackers. These are very smart people making a lot of money, and they're hiring the best talent. We're seeing very organized software development groups that follow a software development life cycle. There isn't some kid in a basement anymore. I mean, these are corporations overseas.
And we're seeing also attacks coming from foreign countries as well, too. I understand that China has its own cyber terrorism group in the government or something like that. Do you know anything about that, Chris? Or
just a little bit. I know that it's very speculative, but it's understood in the security world that China is sponsoring attacks against U.S. companies, U.S. Defense organizations. It's a lot easier to steal information than it is to develop information yourself. So we've seen Lockheed Martin recently hit. 100,000 of their employees had to reset their passwords. The extent of that breach has not been disclosed. RSA was hit. Major companies, Google, Sony was probably not a targeted attack. That was hacker groups going after Sony for various political reasons. But Lockheed, definitely someone was trying to steal secrets of the U.S. government.
So with new legislation, Chris, we're looking at trying to extend the long arm of our legal system to perhaps be able to have subpoenas and those kinds of things honored immediately versus trying to develop something and having that delay in time and the potential loss of records. Is that something that you're also looking at doing? I know that during the hearing you had mentioned that you were developing a bill or had developed a bill that you were hoping to get past the next session.
Correct. Over the last 4 years, 4 states have adopted, in effect, what's a long-arm statute, which gives local police and prosecutors the authority to serve legal process in another state, and that other state would be required to honor Hawaii's legal process. So unfortunately, most of the internet service providers that we deal with are located on the mainland. Other than Hawaiian Tel, they're all located on the mainland. Even Oceanic, Roadrunner, all of their records are located on the mainland. Yahoo, Google, Hotmail, PayPal, et cetera. So what we need is for them to accept our process, whether it be a subpoena, court order, or search warrant, accept it as if it were issued in the state where they're located, honor it, and then respond to us by providing the records to us as quickly as possible before the records are gone. So we're hopeful that that statute will pass. We've drafted the legislation. It's patterned after the California, Florida, Washington, and Minnesota statutes, and we're very hopeful that that will be passed. If it is, it will help us get records quicker and identify the perpetrator quicker and stop the harm that he or she's causing to the victims.
Okay. What do you think the chances are of us getting that through? Has there been a lot of pushback from the ISPs about this at all, or?
No, I don't think that they will have opposition to this. The reality is they know that we could serve a search warrant, for example, on Google. We could serve it on the local district attorney where Google's located in California. They could create their own search warrant, attach ours to theirs, and then serve it on Google, and Google would comply. So the reality is Google knows that we can get the records following that procedure. So I don't think that they're going to fight us on that. And I think for them, the main thing is they want to make sure that we follow the privacy statutes that protect their customers. And we have our own set of privacy statutes here that's based on the Electronic Communication Privacy Act. And we've been following those since we've been prosecuting computer cases. So I don't think that we'll have a lot of pushback from the industry.
Okay. Real quickly, we have just about a minute left. Give us some tips for parents on how they can monitor what their kids are doing and how, helping with, prevent children from falling victim to attack or exposing the family network to these things. Can you give us some quick tips on that?
Yeah, I think parents need to be really involved in the dialogue with their kids about use of cyber technology and being on the internet. Most applications out there, including things like iTunes and a lot of browsers, computers, have parental control settings. Within iTunes, you can set the level of program that they can download. But more importantly, for the whole family, people need to make sure that they're updating their computers. They have auto update turned on. They're running antivirus, that they're updating their browsers. The browsers people need to think of as computers now. They run different things like Java and Flash. They need to keep those updated.
Right.
I would just add that they also need to secure their wireless routers.
Yes, very
important.
Very good point.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. We've run out of time, unfortunately. I know the time has gone quickly. I would like to thank both of you for coming today. And thank you for watching this important show on cybercrime. I'm Representative Fontaine, and we welcome your comments and suggestions on the show. You can send your email to repfontaine@capital.hawaii.gov. That's repfontaine@capital.hawaii.gov. Again, thank you for watching. Aloha.